And we are live here on Facebook.com for Balls and Sticks, the podcast. I am Rich. Mike is out this week as he is taking the week off to spend some time with family, which is a very important, great weekend to do it, with it being a 3-day weekend for Memorial Day. So would like to welcome everybody watching us here on Facebook Live and also listening to us at a later date, either on YouTube or on out in podcast land. So with Mike being off, this will be an unplugged show, which means no outro, no intro, just me and a camera and a microphone. All right, so we're going to start our show just like we do every week by talking about our poll question. So this week's poll question in is still going along with jock jams or stadium songs, and it was in the air tonight and final countdown. We had 6 total votes, so thank you for everybody that voted. I voted for the final countdown just because of it having just imagine that song being played a lot with either your team losing or your team winning, being down to it's getting down to the end of the game and hearing the da 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 da, etc. As that's coming down, as you're coming down to crunch time. Our winning votes and 5 other people agreed with me, and the final countdown won our poll this week. Voting along with me were Jordan Stroop, Matt Johnson, and Danielle Hart. The 2 votes coming in for In the Air tonight were Sue Hart and my buddy Mike. So next week's poll question, which I'll get up once I finish the video here, will be Enter the Sandman going up against Welcome to the Jungle. So watch for that poll to go live here after I finish up the broadcast here. If you want to participate in our poll questions and get a shout out on the show the next week when we give you the results of the poll, make sure to go over to either Fans of Balls and Sticks or Balls and Sticks over on Facebook. So moving right along, we're going to go into looking at playoffs. So the NHL and the NBA are in playoffs, and for the Western Conference Finals, for the NHL, it was the Golden Knights and the Stars. Currently, the Golden Knights lead the series 3-1. Game 5 in Vegas tonight. I know Mikey's going to be rooting for those Vegas Golden Knights to make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals. And over on the Eastern Conference side, we do have a winner as the Florida Panthers beat the Carolina Hurricanes 4-0 in a sweep. So the Panthers will get the winner of the Stars and the Golden Knights. Mike and I will give our picks for the Stanley Cup next week when we're hopefully back on air together. Over to the NBA, the Eastern Conference Finals. Currently, right now, the Heat and the Celtics are battling it out with the Heat leading the series 3-2 as Boston has come back and made it a series as it almost looked like they were going to get swept. So this series could be very interesting to watch as a lot of people were just counting out the Celtics for just getting just losing those close games against the Heat, but they're right back in it. And it almost looks like the Celtics could pull off this series and get back into it, and maybe become the second team in NBA history to come back from a three games to zero deficit and win the series. So Game 6 will be tonight down in Miami. Over on the Western Conference side, the Nuggets swept the Lakers 4 games to 0. So Mike is right on in his prediction saying that the Denver Nuggets could win the NBA Finals. So because of that, and I'm sure he'd agree with me, we will more than likely make this our lunch bet for the week for the NBA NHL. Normally, what we do for this is for the major events, the World Series, the Super Bowl, and we either do the Stanley Cup or the NBA Finals. We each get a team, and we pick a winner. Loser has to buy the other one lunch. So I'm sure that Mike is going to take the Nuggets, so I will take the Eastern Conference final winner between Miami and Boston. But the other news that come out of the NBA was that, and almost what got more of the news was that LeBron James post-game comments saying that this offseason I'm going to have a lot to think about. And the follow-up question was like, well, what do you mean by that? And what did he mean by that? Could mean that maybe he's going to retire, or maybe he's going to decide how many more years he's going to play. He's got 1 year left on his contract, on his current contract with the Lakers, and a lot of talk has been made about how he wants to play his last season with with his son Bronny James, who has to at least play one season in college, and he committed to the University of Southern California right there in Los Angeles. So maybe these comments, so I personally don't know what to make of those comments. Is it, I'm going to retire? Is it, I'm going to retire if we don't get the right people around us? Is it, we need to get a better team around me for my last season, for my last season? Or maybe he's starting to think about how many more years he can play. Because the rap out of with, from what I've read and understood about it with Bronny James, is that he might not be ready to only play 1 year in college and go off to the NBA. Because a lot of people, if there's strings attached to it, though, well, if we draft Bronny, we'll get LeBron James. Or could there be those comments of if if Bronny goes into the draft after 1 year at USC, do the Lakers have that pressure to mortgage the farm, mortgage everything, trade up the number one to get Bronny, so to keep LeBron James happy and connected, happy and with the team, so he doesn't sign with somebody else to play that 1 year with Bronny James. And the one thing that got me thinking about the comments on, well, could this? I've got a lot of things to think about. Was that maybe he does play out his contract with the Lakers, but maybe he made these comments to take some pressure off of Bronny James, to make him decide that, you know what, I don't have to rush my development and leave USC after 1 year. To where maybe LeBron plays out his contract, no matter what happens in LA, it's kind of like a last dance type of season. This is it. I'm leaving. I'm retiring after this year, whether my team makes the playoffs, whether we win the finals, whether we miss the playoffs. This is it. And then once Bronny just declares for the draft, gets drafted, maybe LeBron comes out of retirement to play his one season with whoever team drafts his son, kind of like what Michael Jordan did when he randomly came out of retirement to play for the Washington Wizards. It's just an idea. Doubt it's going to happen, but we will see. All right, so that is by great win by the Denver Nuggets, sweeping the Lakers. It's just sort of a shame that more of the attention got paid to the Lakers than the Denver Nuggets, in my opinion. All right, moving on from the hardwood and the ice, we're going to go over to the baseball diamond. The Chicago Cubs kind of had a rough week this week as they had two against the Phillies, three against the Mets, and one against the Reds from show to show. Mike said they'd win 4 games. I said they'd only win two. And quite frankly, they only won 2 games. They lost those 2 games in Philadelphia after winning the first game. They took 2 out of 3 with the Mets, which was great. And then they came back against the Reds, a lesser competition, and they go and almost get no hit by Hunter Green and the Reds bullpen. A tough game to watch, a tough game to listen to as I was going to listen to the game, and then it just sort of got out of hand. And as I was driving home from work and didn't bother picking it up and watching the rest of it once I got home. Um, wow, this is going to be, it could be a rough month for the Chicago Cubs, but a month that is going to give them a good barometer of what they should do going into the month of July when teams start thinking, all right, are we going to be a seller or are we going to be a buyer? In years past, the parts that the Cubs had to sell was their bullpen. That's not going to be the case this year, as the bullpen is the one thing they're lacking in. So obviously, there's not going to be much of a market for the bullpen guys that they brought in this offseason, who they were maybe hoping to flip. Guys like Michael Fulmer, Brad Boxberger. The only two names that really come to mind of bullpen additions that they brought in to maybe see if they could have a reclamation project and get them back, maybe back on track so they could get something at the trade deadline. It didn't work. It worked last year with David Robinson, and in years past, Andrew Chafin and Chris Martin, to name a few. Didn't work this year. Eventually, Jeb Hoyer's luck with finding bullpen arms on the cheap had to run out, and that happened this year. Um, but the Cubs do still have some trade candidates that could become available and interest other teams. As you got Trey Mancini, who the Cubs have used as a DH, but he can also play first base, left and right, and probably looking into maybe even Cody Bellinger if once he gets back from the injured list. Um, but overall, I mean, the Cubs are still playing decent baseball, just not great baseball. And there has been a bright spot to all of this as Christopher Morel has come on and come back to the major league team, almost proving that he can be a foundational part of this team. So I hope that it's not a situation. I hope that he has made the adjustments that he needs to make to be a full-time player with the team because it seems to me like he could be a foundational piece of the team moving forward, not to mention being somebody that you could build around. And he's got great versatility as he can pretty much play every position on the field except for first catcher and pitcher. So look out for Christopher Morales. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was homering. He was the first player since Sammy Sosa to get to homer in 5 consecutive games. All right. So this week the Cubs will be continuing their weekend series with the Reds, welcoming in probably one of the hottest teams in baseball, the Tampa Bay Rays, for 3 games, and then followed by the San Diego Padres out in San Diego. So that is a night game, which may not count toward our predictions for week to week because we might be recording during that game if we decide to do a Friday night show, but we're still going to include it. I'm still going to include it just in case we do a Saturday show. So for this week, I'm going to stick with two again and think that because being if the team that shows up that played on Friday night against the Reds, and I think it's a division rival. So I think if we're going to get the 2 wins, I think it's probably going to be splitting the series with Cincinnati, and then maybe finding a way to squeak out one game against the Rays. Maybe we catch the Rays on a bullpen day instead of having one of their full-time starters. And I still believe in the Padres, even though the standings will say otherwise with how unexpected they're doing. But more on that later, as we are going to take a look at the standings. As traditionally, if you're leading your division on Memorial Day, you've got a pretty good chance of winning your division. So we're going to go ahead and start over in the American League. In the American League East, both Mike and I said that the New York Yankees would be winning that division. And currently, the current division winner over in the American League East is those Tampa Bay Rays who will be coming into Chicago this weekend. Currently, the New York Yankees are in third place in the division with a record of 30 and 23 and are 8 games out. The current leader in the American League Central is the Minnesota Twins with the record of 26 and 25, only one game above 500. We both said that the Cleveland Guardians would win the division. They're currently 22 and 28, 3.5 games out. Over in the West, Mike and I disagreed. He said the Mariners. I said the Astros for the division. The current division leader is the Texas Rangers with a record of 32 and 18. The Astros are 29 and 21, 3 games back in the division. The Mariners are 6.5 games back out, 6.5 out with 26 and 25. Um, on the wild card side, our wild cards that Mike gave were the Blue Jays, the Houston baseball team, and the Twins. I said the Blue Jays, the Rays, and the Twins. And right now, the two current wild card teams in the American League are the Baltimore Orioles and the Houston Astros. So the teams that we both said that Toronto would make it in as a wild card. They're currently 2.5 games out with a record of 27 and 25. Worst record in the American League. The Oakland A's. The Oakland A's currently have a record 10 and 43. Now, it seems like they are bound for Vegas, and there's no way that they're going to be convinced to stay in Oakland. But man, if there was any chance of hope that Oakland fans could have to show up, show that their city still deserves the A's, they love and support their A's, man, this team is not giving their fans a reason to show up. Yes, it is bad. Things aren't much better in Kansas City. The other local team that's close to home for both Mike and I, as the Royals are 15 and 37, 14 and a half back of even getting a wild card spot, let alone the division. Looking over to the National League, in the National League East, both Mike and I said that the Atlanta Braves would be winning the division. Currently, they are winning the division. They have a 4.5 game lead over the New York Mets. They are 31 and 20. Over in the National League Central, we both said the St. Louis Cardinals would be winning the division. Currently, they are ahead by winning percentage only as they have a 23 and 30 record for fourth in the division. The Milwaukee Brewers currently lead the division at 27 and 24. More on those Brewers after we get done looking at the standings, as some news came out of Milwaukee involving them and Commissioner Rob Manfred. The Chicago Cubs are third in division at 4.5 games out. They're 22 and 28, probably right where we expected them to be at this point of the year. Over in the West, Mike went with the defending champion Dodgers. I said the upstart San Diego Padres. The Dodgers currently lead the division by a game and a half over the Arizona Diamondbacks, 31 and 21. While my pick of the Padres is 24 and 27, 3 games under 500 and 6.5 back in the division. For wild cards in the National League, Mike went with the Padres, the Mets, and the Phillies. I went with the Dodgers, the Mets, and the Phillies. The National League wild card standings would currently have the Diamondbacks, the Pirates, and the Mets making the playoffs if the playoffs ended today. The Mets, not a surprise by that. They're a team that a lot of people picked to even win the World Series with a lot of their stars that they have in that lineup, especially on the pitching side with Scherzer and Verlander, not to mention Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso in the lineup. But the Pirates and the Diamondbacks, two surprise teams there. The Diamondbacks are clearly rebuilding, trying to get a lot of their young stars in the lineup and get them well established in the major leagues. And the Pirates are doing the pirate things, paying people the minimum salary, bringing up rookies, bringing up people on rookie contracts, and hoping to maybe flip some veterans at the trade deadline. And right now, they'd be in the playoffs. So we'll see if that early success in Arizona and Pittsburgh can play out throughout the entire season. But at least it's for fans of Pittsburgh, one of the best ballparks. Even though I haven't been to it, the best ballparks in baseball. It's it's great to see that they finally have a team playing on that field that is really competitive. As far as the other teams that we said would make the playoffs as a wild card team, the San Diego Padres are 2.5 games back of the final wild card spot. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2.5 games back as well, as they have identical records. Um, as the Padres are 27, about both teams, sorry, are 24 and 27. The St. Louis Cardinals are 4.5 games out at 23 and 30. The Cubs are 4 games out of a wild card at 22 and 28. Worst record in the National League goes to the Colorado Rockies, who are 5 games out. Not as bad as those bottom dwellers in the National League, as they're still hanging in there at 22 and 30. So there's a lot of teams jumbled up at the bottom that could easily switch spots based on how strength of schedule goes. So we'll relook at these standings again, probably around the All-Star break, and to see how we're doing. Right now, my World Series matchup with the Padres over the Yankees, I'm not really feeling too comfortable about that, but it's still early. San Diego could get Yu Darvish back and or make some additions at the trade deadline to put that team over the top. And the Yankees, they're still waiting for their major free agent pitching addition, Carlos Rodon, to come back and actually start the season. So hopefully, with those two teams, with those additions plus trade deadline acquisitions, those teams can get back into it and have a legitimate chance. Mike went with the Yankees over the Dodgers. I feel good about the Dodgers fire, Mike. Not as much about the Yankees, but both teams do what it takes to win and win in the postseason. So I mentioned Milwaukee Brewers made some news this weekend, but it might not be for what they were wanting or for the fans. As a report was leaked that Commissioner Rob Manfred has made demands to them saying that if the Brewers do not make improvements to American Family Field, the team could be in jeopardy of having to relocate. I've been to Miller Park and American Family Field several times, and I don't think that the stadium is in a condition where you need to be making threats like that. So it's kind of sad, especially when you have situations in Tampa Bay and Oakland where their stadium situations are in even worse shape than the Brewers. Not to mention the Brewers actually have fan support and fans that come out to the ballpark on a daily basis, no matter regardless of how the team is playing. And while in Oakland and Tampa, you don't have that. And there's been no talk while in Oakland they have said they're relocating, they're gone. Tampa Tampa has never had to have the commissioner come out and say these separate things. So I'm hoping that whether the improvements get made or not, or whether this is an empty, while this is maybe, and while I'm really hoping that this just ends up to being an empty threat to hopefully get the improvements done that need to be done. And maybe it's a situation to where the Milwaukee ownership didn't want to be the ones to be the bad guys and come out and say, we need to get these improvements, or we might have to explore moving. Or moving. I mean, the Milwaukee Brewers have already lost a Major League Baseball about twice. Twice they've lost teams, at least once, for sure, as when they had the Braves up there. So I'd hate to see the Brewers lose and get relocated, especially when there are other situations, other teams that need stadium upgrades more than the Brewers do, I think. But more on that later. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, and the Brewers stay in Milwaukee. All right. So that's all that I have in the MLB. So make sure to catch those Cubbies in action this week, as you can even catch the first game against the Reds from show to show here on Fox or FS1, because they are the one of the Saturday games of the week. All right, folks, do you see what's coming up next? It's a left turn, and followed by that is another left turn as we're going to go into the NASCAR corner, presented by Triple I Sports Cards Incorporated. Triple I Sports Cards Incorporated is located in Moline, Illinois, over on Fifth Avenue, or you can also find them on eBay. Triple I Sports Cards Incorporated. So last week we were in North Wilkesboro for the first time since 1996, where they had the All-Star race. Kyle Larson was your winner as he won in dominant fashion. Because even coming from the rear, as he had to overcome a pit road speeding penalty to start from the rear, marched his way up for the front, and as soon as he got the lead, he never gave it back and won in dominant fashion. Mike's pick of Chase Elliott came in fifth, and my pick of Martin Truex Jr. came in 14th. So because this was an all-star race, much like the drivers, we got no points if we didn't win the race. So the score remains the same. So our score between Mike and I stays the same. All right, so I was really hoping to get Mike's opinion on what he thought of the North Wilkesboro race. So, well, that'll have to wait another week. Um, I'm really not sure what to think of it personally. From watching the truck race, I knew going into the cup race that the only way that you were going to get good racing and be able to get good tire grip was to be on the low side of the track. And that's what happened in the cup race. So obviously I was kind of surprised when Larson got that speeding penalty and he had to start from the rear on the next stage at the break. I thought his day was over. So knowing what I knew from watching the truck race a little bit. So, I mean, I hope that North Wilkesboro can get included on the NASCAR Cup Series on the circuit going forward. But obviously, I think if they're going to race there on a consistent basis, probably a repave is going to have to be done. But I'm interested to see what Mike has to say about North Wilkesboro, as it just seemed like with the cup race, if you weren't on the bottom side, you probably weren't going to be able to pass anybody. So it was a race. So it was a lot of people being in a train, staying on the bottom portion of the track. So, all right. So this week we are in Charlotte. We're staying in the state of North Carolina, as it'll be the Coca-Cola 600, part of the 11,000 miles of racing, as I alluded in our show title. Mike had the honors and he gave me his pick by filling out the outline when we talked via text a little bit this morning. And he said that he wanted to go with Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, I think, is a great pick for this race. He's got some momentum coming back from going from his victory at North Wilkesboro and getting $1 million in his pocket. And he's the odds-on favorite to win the race. So a good pick by Mike, and I don't blame him for going with Larson. I'm going to go with his Hendrick Motorsports teammate and go William Byron. William Byron has done really well at the mile-and-a-half tracks this year, so I think he's going to stay hot. You can catch the Coca-Cola 600 at 5 o'clock over on the Fox network. So the other half of the 1,100 miles is the Indy 500. The Indy 500, um, down in Indianapolis, obviously, will have is over at 11:45 on NBC. Mike told me he wanted to go with Scott Dixon. I'm going to go with Rinus VeeKay. Dixon drives a Honda, has a Honda engine in his vehicle. Rinus VeeKay, I think, is a Chevy. So Mike has always talked about a little bit about the Memorial Day double. This year, nobody is doing both races, the Coca-Cola 600 and the Indy 500. Next year, though, there will be somebody doing it. And that somebody is going to be Kyle Larson. I think it was last week. He had kind of like his orientation or test day um, driving an open wheel Indy car, and he's looking forward to getting in the car next year to do the double. And I believe another guy that I remember hearing about, reading about that could that's interested in doing the Memorial Day double was Kyle Busch. That was part of what what was part of the reason why what led him to sign with Richard Childress Racing. Because I guess it was something that he was unable to do based off of being with Joe Gibbs Racing. So watch for that next year in 2024 is Kyle Larson and maybe even Kyle Busch getting to do the Memorial Day double. So that was the NASCAR. So we're going to come off of pit road and get out of here and get out of the NASCAR corner, presented by Triple I Sports Cards Incorporated, Fifth Avenue in Moline, or you can find them on eBay. We're going to keep making left turns, but we're going to go to the dirt as we got to talk about the Preakness Stakes. The Preakness Stakes, the second leg of the Triple Crown, was won by National Treasure, which was Mike's pick. My pick of Blazing Sevens came in second, and I think this is probably the best we have ever picked on the horse picking when we pick the ponies for the Triple Crown. So we'll see if our luck continues when we look at the Belmont Stakes, which is next week out in Long Island on June 10th. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this week's show by talking about some news that came out of the NFL as quick hits. We'll probably talk about these next week as well because I want to get Mike's opinion on these as well. So the first that probably won't require much of an opinion is that Tom Brady already removed and retired as a player, getting ready to go into the broadcast booth, has bought into and is going to be a minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. It's unknown how much of the Raiders he will have, but he's also going to be part of the ownership group for the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team that Mark Davis owns as well. So that's probably not going to impact him at all being getting a jersey retired by either Tampa or New England, but kind of surprised that he didn't reach out to one of those teams to see if they had an interest in in letting him buy into the franchise. The second thing to touch on with the NFL this week is that the NFL owners approve an emergency QB proposal. So this rule only applies to a quarterback who is on the team's 53-man roster. Practice squad players are not eligible to be emergency quarterbacks, not even if they're elevated for that week's game, but allows a team to avoid counting the emergency quarterback as one of its active players on game day, a modest initiative for teams that otherwise would not have chosen to go into a game with only two available quarterbacks. Obviously, this rule had to be put into place, or the NFL owners had a reason to put this into place after what happened in the NFC Championship game between the Eagles and the 49ers, when not only starting quarterback Brock Purdy, but backup quarterback Josh Johnson were knocked out of the game. And the 49ers were forced to run gadget plays with Christian McCaffrey as a quarterback or rolling out Brock Purdy out there who had a torn ACL, torn shoulder muscle, knowing that he was just going to be handing off the ball as he was unable to throw it. So I think this rule is almost needed so that the NFL doesn't get so that the NFL can have competitive football games in theory if those two quarterbacks go down. So there are some parameters around the league which I think was needed and I think was a great idea for it. Is that the emergency quarterback would not be eligible for in-game activation if the rest of the team's quarterbacks are only able to be eligible for activation if the rest of the team's quarterbacks are unable to participate due to injury or ejection, not as a result of benching. So in the case So I guess using an example of the Chicago Bears, let's say that Justin Fields gets benched for poor play. The backup whoever that is these days, gets injured and is out, the Bears couldn't call up they couldn't activate their emergency quarterback to go into the game. They would have to insert in Fields. He would not be eligible to come back unless one of those, unless both quarterbacks are out. The other stipulation that is that if one of the other quarterbacks is cleared to return to the game, the emergency quarterback must be removed at that time and can return only if there is once again no other option. So going back to the example with the 49ers, where you had Josh Johnson getting knocked out of the game, unable to return, and Brock Purdy being unable to throw a ball. Yes, Brock Purdy got back into action in the game, but they knew he couldn't throw the ball. So at that point, the team probably would, in that situation, Brock Purdy would have been deactivated. The emergency quarterback comes in, would be active for the rest of the game. So what happens? So I like the rule. I'm looking forward to getting Mike's opinion on it. But I think it's needed. You didn't. It was sad to see the game end the way it did for the 49ers. What chances would they've had in the Super Bowl if they had somehow won the game with a third string quarterback? Probably not as good as the Eagles played in that Super Bowl, but it would have been interesting to see what this would have been like, how this would have affected that 49ers Eagles game if this rule was in place. And third, the the NFL continued making changes to the NFL, but I'm gonna put this one on the back burner and save this for next week because I know Mike's gonna have opinions on this one, and that is the NFL kickoff changes. So I'll go ahead and kind of overview what this is, but we'll talk about this next week. Kind of a little preview for next week. So the kickoff rule that the NFL is going to put into a place on a one season trial is that a fair catch on a kickoff can be placed at the 25-yard line regardless of where it is fielded. So the kicking team can field it on the 5-yard line, wait for the fair catch to get it on the 25, or they field it in the end zone and elect not to return it out, or they could field the thing on the 24-yard line, wait for the fair catch. They get an inch, then they get the inch and start the game on the 25-yard line. What we'll talk about this next week as uh, I'm kind of torn on it. I know Mike's going to be torn on about it. So this is a great topic for both of us to kind of talk back and forth on. And I look forward to doing that next week when he's back. All right. So that is our show this week. Kind of a shorter show. Tends to be that way when it's just one of us flying solo and doing the episode. So Mike, I hope you enjoy your time with your family and you're back next week. As far as other shout outs, got to say happy birthday to my sister-in-law, Ashley Couture. And it is Memorial Day weekend, so I can't leave the show without just remembering to let people know to make sure to um, take time to remember the ones that died and didn't make it home, which is what Memorial Day is all about. Memorial Day is the day to honor the ones that did not make it back home and pay the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms that we have in this country. For me, that individual that comes to mind when I think about that is the guy that I served with over in Iraq, Sergeant Brian Romines, who passed away on June 6th from an IED attack out on route out in Iraq. So yeah, so that is our show for this week. If you're listening to us on Facebook, um, you can always catch us over. You can also take us on the road and listen to us on podcasts by downloading by looking for the audio recordings of our show. You can find it anywhere where you find your podcasts: Google, Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio, just to name a few. And if you're listening to us over in podcast land, there are two ways that you can watch our show. Watch the live stream of the show over on Facebook, or if you're not into Facebook and but still want to see the visual portion of our show, you can find us on YouTube as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Watch for the poll question to go live, which will be Enter the Sandman going up against Welcome to the Jungle over on Balls and Sticks is Facebook page, and we'll talk at you next week.